Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you an incredible story that will leave you speechless. Let's learn the story of Aidan Hawke, a 19-year-old young man who, after a near-death experience, returned with a shocking revelation about time. He saw the past, present, and future at the same time. What he discovered on this journey will change everything you think about life and the universe. Prepare to be surprised and deeply reflect. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Now, get ready for this surprising revelation. My name is Aidan Hawke, and today, at age 34, I'm about to share with you a story that completely changed the course of my life. 15 years ago, I was a 19-year-old young man, full of skepticism and disbelief toward anything that couldn't be proven by science. I lived an ordinary life, or so I thought, until a series of extraordinary events led me to question everything I believed I knew about reality, life, and death. Before I dive into the details of my experience, it's important for you to understand who I was at that time. I considered myself a convinced rationalist, someone who sought logical explanations for all phenomena in the world. Spirituality, for me, was nothing more than a set of unfounded beliefs, an emotional crutch for those who could not face the harshness of reality. This worldview, however, was about to be drastically shaken by an experience that would challenge all my beliefs. An experience that would take me beyond the limits of what I believed was possible, forcing me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about life, consciousness, and the universe itself. What I'm about to tell you may seem unbelievable, even fantastic. I confess that if someone had told me this story 15 years ago, I would have dismissed it as delusion or, at best, as a hallucination induced by some chemical imbalance in the brain. But what I experienced was so profound, so visceral and transformative, that I can no longer deny its reality or its impact on my life. This is the story of my journey, a journey that began with pain and despair, took me beyond the limits of existence itself, and brought me back with a completely new perspective on what it means to be alive. It is the story of how I, an inveterate skeptic, was forced to confront the possibility that there is much more to reality than our eyes can see or our current science can explain. I ask that you, listener or reader of this narrative, keep an open mind. I'm not here to convince anyone or to preach a new universal truth. I'm simply here to share my experience in the hopes that it can offer a different perspective, maybe even a little comfort or hope to those who are struggling with similar issues to the ones I faced. So let's start from the beginning. Let's go back to that moment when my ordinary life was turned upside down, the moment when I was forced to face not only my own mortality, but also the incomprehensible vastness of what might lie beyond it. It all started when I was 19 years old. I was an ordinary university student, with dreams and ambitions typical of a young person my age. My life followed a predictable course until, without warning, my body began to betray me in ways I could never have imagined. At first, they were just small signs: unusual fatigue, occasional dizziness, nothing I couldn't attribute to the stress of studying or a bad night's sleep. But quickly, these symptoms evolved into something much more serious and frightening. I started experiencing intense heart palpitations, as if my heart was trying to escape from my chest. My blood pressure fluctuated dangerously, sometimes rising to alarming levels, other times dropping so low that I could barely stand. The feeling of weakness became constant, as if all the energy in my body was slowly being drained. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, my limbs heavy as lead, my mind foggy and confused. The world around me seemed to be constantly spinning, making even the simplest tasks a monumental challenge. Most frustrating of all was that, despite countless medical appointments, exams, and tests, no concrete diagnosis was offered. The doctors seemed as perplexed as I was. They spoke in vague terms about possible autoimmune disorders, rare syndromes, or even psychosomatic causes, but nothing quite fit the picture of my symptoms. Each visit to the doctor became a new disappointment. I saw the frustration in the eyes of the healthcare professionals, unable to offer answers or relief. Treatments were tried and discarded, medications were prescribed and abandoned when they proved ineffective. My life became an endless series of appointments, exams, and experimental therapies, none of which brought the relief I so desperately sought. The impact on my life was devastating. I had to abandon my studies, unable to keep up with classes and work. My relationships suffered as I didn't have the energy to socialize or maintain connections. My dreams and plans for the future seemed increasingly distant, replaced by a painful present and an uncertain future. As the months passed without improvement, I began to sink into a pit of despair. The frustration of not having a diagnosis, of not understanding what was happening to my own body, was almost as debilitating as the physical symptoms. I, who had always trusted science and medicine to provide answers, found myself at a dead end, faced with the limits of current medical knowledge. It was at this lowest point that my mother, Eleanor, stepped in with a suggestion that, at the time, seemed absurd to me. She talked about a monastery in the mountains of California, a place where, according to her, miracles happened. People with incurable diseases supposedly found healing there, amid the peace and spirituality of the place. Initially, I laughed at the idea. Me, the skeptic, seeking healing in a monastery. It seemed like the height of despair, but as my condition worsened and medical options ran out, I began to consider it. What did I have to lose? If it didn't work, at least I would have tried everything. It was with this mindset, a mix of skepticism and desperate desperation, that I agreed to take the trip. Little did I know that this decision, made almost out of abandonment, would be the first step on a journey that would change not only my health, but my entire understanding of reality. The trip to the monastery was a surreal experience in itself. As we moved further away from civilization and deeper into the mountains of California, it was as if we were crossing an invisible border between two worlds. The constant noise of modern life was gradually replaced by an almost tangible silence, punctuated only by the gentle sound of wind through the trees and the occasional song of distant birds. I vividly remember the moment the monastery appeared before us, emerging from the mist that seemed to permanently envelop the mountains. The complex of ancient buildings seemed more like a vision than a concrete reality. The weathered stone walls contrasted with the bright red roofs, creating an image that looked like something out of a fairy tale or a dream. When we got out of the car, I was immediately enveloped by an atmosphere that I cannot adequately describe with words. It was as if the air was thicker, charged not with humidity or pollution but with something more ethereal, a feeling of peace and tranquility that seemed to emanate from the very stones of the monastery. The monks who greeted us moved with a grace and serenity that made me instantly uncomfortable. Their serene faces and gentle smiles contrasted drastically with my internal state of agitation and skepticism. They led us through silent corridors, where the only sound was the soft brush of their robes against the stone floor. Our room was simple, almost Spartan in its decor. A narrow bed, a rustic wooden table, and a small window that offered a breathtaking view of the mist-shrouded mountains. There was no television, no internet, nor any of the modern amenities I was accustomed to. It was as if we had been transported to another century. The first days at the monastery were an adaptation exercise. The silence, which initially bothered me deeply, slowly began to become a balm for my agitated mind. The simple meals, prepared with ingredients grown by the monks themselves, had a flavor I had never experienced before. It was as if each bite carried not only nutrition, but also a deep connection to the land. I observed the monks in their daily routines, their prayers and meditations. There was a rhythm to their movements, a harmony to their voices as they sang, that seemed to resonate with something deep within me. Even in my state of skepticism, I couldn't help but feel touched by the devotion and peace that emanated from them. At night, lying in my simple bed, I looked out the window at the starry sky. Far from the light pollution of the cities, the stars shone with an intensity I had never seen before. It was as if the universe itself was closer, more present. Despite this atmosphere of peace and spirituality, my skepticism remained firm. Part of me still believed this was all an elaborate act, a giant placebo designed to make people believe in miracle cures. I constantly wondered if I was wasting precious time that could be spent on more conventional medical treatments. However, As the days went by, I started to notice small changes in myself. My breathing felt easier, my sleep deeper. The pain that constantly tormented me seemed less intense. I didn't know if it was the fresh mountain air, the simple diet, or simply being away from the stresses of everyday life. But something was changing. It was on the third day of our stay that something happened. Something that would challenge everything I believed possible. Something that would force me to question the very nature of reality. An experience that began in my simple room at the monastery and took me on a journey beyond the limits of what I believed to be the real world. It was the third day of our stay at the monastery. I was lying on my simple bed, watching the last rays of the setting sun paint the sky with shades of orange and pink through the small window. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant sound of the monastery bells announcing the time of evening prayer. That's when it happened. At first, it was a subtle, almost imperceptible sensation. It was as if my body was becoming lighter, as if gravity was losing its hold on me. I tried to move, thinking maybe it was just a strange manifestation of my usual symptoms, but my body didn't respond. Panic began to set in when I realized I couldn't even move a finger. He was completely paralyzed, unable to scream for help. My mind was alert, hyper-attentive even, but my body was completely disconnected. It was then that the feeling of lightness intensified. It was like something was pulling at me, not physically, but in a way I couldn't understand. I felt a strange pressure as if something was trying to pull away from me. And then, in an instant, it happened. It was as if I had been catapulted out of my own body. Suddenly, I was floating above the bed, looking down at my own body lying motionless. The sight was surreal, impossible to believe, and yet undeniably real. My first reaction was shock and disbelief. How could this be happening? Was it a dream? A hallucination caused by my condition? But the clarity of my perception was undeniable. I could see every detail of the room with a clarity that surpassed my normal vision. The colors seemed more vibrant, the contours more defined. I looked at my hands, or what I perceived as my hands in this new state, and was shocked to see that they were translucent, with a faint bluish luminescence. There was no physical substance, but I could feel in some inexplicable way that it was still me. The feeling of being outside my body was indescribable. There was no weight, there were no physical limitations. It was as if I were pure consciousness, free from the bonds of matter. The initial fear began to give way to a feeling of freedom and expansion that I had never experienced before. I floated around the room, marveling at how easily I could move. There was no effort, just intention. If I thought about moving to a corner of the room, instantly I was there. Physics, as I knew it, no longer seemed to apply. It was at that moment that I realized that my perception extended beyond the walls of the room. It was as if the physical structures had become transparent, allowing me to see through them. He could see the other rooms, the monastery corridors, and beyond. What surprised me even more was that I could see the monks in their cells, some in deep meditation, others in silent prayer. But it wasn't just a visual vision. Somehow, I could feel his emotions, sense his thoughts. It was a form of empathy so deep and immediate that it left me stunned. I felt a deep peace emanating from the meditating monks, a tranquility that seemed to radiate from them in gentle waves. At the same time, I could feel the intensity of the devotion of those in prayer, their minds focused with a clarity I never imagined possible. It was overwhelming. Hirasin, who had always been skeptical of anything spiritual, was experiencing something that completely challenged my understanding of the world. There was no denying the reality of what I was feeling, seeing, experiencing. As I took it all in, I felt a new shift. It was as if a gentle but irresistible force was pulling me upward. I looked one last time at my physical body on the bed, feeling a strange mix of detachment and curiosity. So, without resistance, I surrendered to this new strength. In an instant, I was launched out of the monastery, soaring quickly through the clouds. The feeling was indescribable. There was no fear. There was no falling sensation that would normally accompany such a movement. just a feeling of absolute freedom and expansion. As I climbed, my perspective changed drastically. The monastery dwindled below me, becoming a tiny dot in the mountains. The mountains, in turn, became mere ripples on the Earth's surface. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was in space, looking at planet Earth in all its glory. The view was breathtaking. The deep blue of the oceans, the green and brown of the continents, the white clouds swirling in complex patterns, all seen from a perspective only astronauts have experienced before. But that was just the beginning. What came next would forever change my understanding of our place in the universe and the nature of reality itself. As I hovered in space, watching the Earth spin beneath me, something extraordinary began to happen. The planet's surface began to emit a soft glow, as if an inner light was awakening. It was a breathtaking sight, but what came next was even more surprising. Lines of light began to form, connecting different points on the planet. It was as if I was seeing a gigantic neural network, pulsing with energy and life. These lines were not limited to the surface. They extended into space, forming a complex, interconnected web that enveloped the entire planet. With a shock of recognition, I realized that what I was seeing was much more than just physical geography. It was the Earth as a living organism, pulsing with energy and consciousness. Each line of light represented connections between ecosystems, between living beings, between the planet and the cosmos. The rainforests pulsed with vibrant green, acting as the planet's lungs. The oceans rippled a deep blue, like the circulatory system of this planetary entity. Air currents and ocean currents formed complex patterns, like the nervous and lymphatic systems of this colossal living being. But the most surprising thing was the points of light that represented human consciousness. Billions of tiny lights, each unique, forming clusters in cities and spreading across continents. I could feel the energy of these consciousnesses, their hopes, fears, joys, and sadness. It was a symphony of emotions and thoughts on a planetary scale. However, amidst all this beauty, I noticed something disturbing. There were areas where the lines of light were weakened or broken, regions where the web of life seemed to be unraveling. With a sudden and painful realization, I recognized that these were the areas where human activity was causing significant damage to the planet. Deforested forests appeared as dark scars. Polluted oceans appeared as murky patches in the web of light. The atmosphere, at certain points, seemed to be becoming thinner and more fragile. It was as if I could see, in real time, the impact of our civilization on the health of this living being that shelters us. But I also saw hope. In many places, small points of light were working to repair the damage. They were people and communities dedicated to healing and restoring the planet. Your actions, no matter how small, created positive ripples in the energy grid, strengthening connections and restoring balance. At that moment, I understood that the Earth was not just our home, but a living being of which we were an integral part. Our every action, every thought, every choice had a direct impact on the health and well-being of this larger organism. The scale of this achievement was overwhelming. I, who had always seen myself as a separate and independent individual, now saw myself as part of something much larger. My individual consciousness was like a cell within this vast planetary body, connected and interdependent with all other life forms. This vision fundamentally changed my understanding of my place in the universe. We were not just inhabitants of the Earth, we were the Earth. Our health, our well-being, our future were inextricably linked to the health and well-being of the planet as a whole. As I absorbed this deep understanding, I felt a shift in the energy around me. The vision of Earth began to dissolve, giving way to something even more vast and incomprehensible. I was being taken further, into an experience that would further challenge my perception of reality. As the vision of Earth faded, I was enveloped by a deep darkness. For a moment, I felt completely alone in the emptiness of the cosmos. But this feeling of isolation only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, in the distance, I noticed a point of light. It was tiny at first, barely noticeable. But as my attention focused on it, the light began to grow. Or perhaps I was moving toward it. It was hard to tell as all the landmarks were gone. The light expanded, becoming brighter and more intense with each moment. It wasn't a white light, as I might have expected, but a rich, vibrant gold. It was as if the sun itself had been distilled into its purest essence. When the light completely enveloped me, I experienced something that defies adequate description in human words. It was as if every atom of my being was being bathed in pure love and unconditional acceptance. The feeling was so intense, so overwhelming, that I felt like I was dissolving into it. In that moment, all the worries, fears, and pain I carried simply disappeared. My physical condition, which had been the center of my existence for so long, seemed trivial and distant. I was immersed in a peace so deep and complete that it made any other state of happiness I had ever experienced seem pale in comparison. But it wasn't just a feeling of well-being. With this light came an understanding, a knowledge that seemed to flow directly into my consciousness. I understood, without words or explanations, that this light was the source of all existence. It was the love that sustained the universe, the consciousness from which all life emanated. In this light, I saw the interconnectedness of all things. Every thought, every action, every moment of existence was linked to everything else in the universe in a web of causality and meaning. There were no accidents, there were no coincidences. Everything was part of a larger pattern, a cosmic design of infinite beauty and purpose. I also understood that this light, this source, was within each one of us. It was not something external, something to be sought or achieved. It was our true nature, obscured by the illusion of separation we experience in our physical existence. In this state of oneness with the light, I experienced a sense of homecoming. It was like I had finally found the place where I truly belonged. All the struggle, all the pain of my earthly life seemed to have been just a temporary dream, an illusion from which I had finally awakened. For a moment, or perhaps an eternity, for time had no meaning in that state, I considered remaining there. The peace, the love, the understanding I experienced was so complete that the idea of returning to my limited, painful existence seemed almost unbearable. But then, gently, without words, I received an understanding. My journey on earth was not complete. There was a purpose to my existence, a role to play in the great cosmic drama that I had not yet fulfilled. With this understanding came a sense of acceptance and even anticipation. I knew that I would take with me a part of this light, this understanding, back to my earthly life. Slowly, I felt the light begin to retract. There was no fear or resistance on my part, just calm acceptance. I knew that what I had experienced would forever change my perspective on life, death, and the purpose of existence. As the golden light dimmed, a new vision began to form before me. It was something equally vast and incomprehensible, but of a completely different nature. I was about to witness something that would further challenge my understanding of reality and time. As the golden light dissipated, a new vision began to form before me. It was as if the very fabric of space-time was unfolding, revealing patterns and structures I never imagined possible. Before me, I saw an immense wheel, slowly rotating in the void. It was a complex structure, with countless concentric hoops, each representing a different time scale, from seconds to millennia. The wheel was not rotating in a linear direction, but rather in a multidimensional movement that defied my understanding. As I focused my attention on this wheel, I began to see scenes unfolding on its surface. They were fragments of human history, not just the past, but also the present and what seemed to be the future. The most surprising thing was that all of these events seemed to be occurring simultaneously. I saw the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, the splendor of Pharaoh's Egypt, the glory of Rome, the height of the Aztec and Inca empires. At the same time, I witnessed events from modern history, the two world wars, the arrival of man on the moon, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and, on another spoke of the wheel, I glimpsed scenes that seemed to be from the future: floating cities, interstellar travel, technologies beyond my understanding. What struck me deeply was the interconnectedness of all these events. Every action, Every decision made at one point in the story created ripples that affected everything else. I saw how the choices of ancient leaders shaped the course of future civilizations, and how ideas born in one corner of the world transformed societies on the other side of the planet. But what was most surprising was realizing that, from the perspective of this cosmic wheel, all of these events, past, present, and future, existed simultaneously. Time, as I understood it, was just an illusion created by our limited perception. In fact, everything was happening at the same time, in an eternal now. This realization was deeply destabilizing. All the concepts of cause and effect, of linear progression of time, that formed the basis of my understanding of the world were suddenly challenged. I saw that our perception of time as a straight line was just a gross simplification of a much more complex and interconnected reality. Looking at this wheel, I also realized the relative insignificance of many of the things we consider important in our daily lives. Wars that seemed monumental on our temporal scale were just small tremors in the vast tapestry of time. Empires that considered themselves eternal appeared and disappeared in the blink of a cosmic eye. At the same time, I saw the importance of each individual life, of each action. Every person, no matter how seemingly insignificant, had a role to play in this vast cosmic drama. Every act of kindness, every innovative idea, every expression of love created ripples that rippled through time and space, affecting the whole in ways that were impossible to predict. This view of the wheel of time made me deeply question the concept of free will. If everything was already happening simultaneously, were our choices really ours? Or were we simply actors playing predetermined roles in a cosmic script? Yet even in the face of this perplexing question, I felt a deep sense of purpose. Every life, every choice, every moment had meaning within this vast cosmic pattern. Perhaps free will was not a matter of changing destiny, but of how we choose to play our role in this eternal drama. As I contemplated these profound questions, the wheel of time began to spin more quickly. Scenes from human history blended together in a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. I saw civilizations born, flourish, and disappear in the blink of an eye. Technologies evolved, religions emerged and transformed, empires rose and fell. Amid this whirlwind, I noticed recurring patterns. The same themes: love, conflict, search for knowledge, struggle for power, recurred on different scales throughout history. It was as if humanity was constantly reenacting the same stories, learning and relearning the same lessons in an eternal cycle. But I also saw evolution. Through the cycles of rise and fall, I noticed a slow but steady movement toward greater understanding, a gradual expansion of human consciousness. Each cycle seemed to take us a little closer to understanding our true nature and our place in the cosmos. As the wheel turned, my perception expanded even further. Now it was not just human history that I saw, but the history of the universe itself. I saw the birth of stars, the formation of galaxies, the cosmic dance of black holes. And in all this vastness, the Earth and humanity seemed insignificantly small. Yet, paradoxically, the more I saw of the immensity of the cosmos, the more I realized the importance of each individual life. Each conscious being was like a window through which the universe observed and understood itself. Each of us was a microcosm, reflecting and containing within us all the complexity and beauty of the macrocosm. Slowly, the rotation of the wheel began to decrease. The images became less clear, dissolving into a blur of light and color. I felt like my journey through time and space was coming to an end. A sense of return began to wash over me. As the vision of the wheel of time faded, I took with me a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, the cyclical nature of existence, and the importance of each moment and each choice. I knew this vision would forever change the way I viewed my own life and my place in the universe. As the last image of the wheel faded, I felt a sudden change. It was as if he was being pulled back, quickly, through layers and layers of reality. I was returning to my body, to my earthly life, but I knew it would no longer be the same after what I had experienced. Returning to my physical body was an intense and painful experience. After having experienced the freedom and expansion of the incorporeal state, returning to the confines of the flesh was like being compressed into a tiny, suffocating space. The first sensation was one of crushing weight. It was as if every cell in my body was being pressured by an invisible force. My lungs felt like they had forgotten how to breathe, and I had to make a conscious effort to breathe in and out. Slowly, I began to feel my limbs again. Painful tingles ran through my arms and legs, as if thousands of needles were piercing my skin. My head throbbed with intense pain, as if it was about to explode. I opened my eyes with difficulty, blinking several times to adjust my vision. The light in the room, although dim, seemed blinding after the ethereal luminosity I had experienced. The contours of the objects seemed strangely solid and defined, almost artificial compared to the fluidity of the spiritual realm. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy and clumsy. Every move was a monumental effort. I felt like a diver returning to the surface after being in the depths of the ocean, disoriented, with confused senses, struggling to readjust to the Earth's atmosphere. As my consciousness fully reasserted itself in my body, I was flooded with a wave of emotions. Joy for being alive, sadness for having left that state of grace, fear of the unknown, gratitude for the experience I had had. All of this mixed together in an overwhelming whirlwind. Tears started streaming down my face. They were not tears of sadness or joy, but of an emotion so deep and complex that it had no name. It was as if my body was releasing the full intensity of the experience I had just had. In the days that followed, something extraordinary began to happen. Gradually, I noticed that the symptoms that had plagued me for so long were subsiding. Heart palpitations that were constant have become rare. My blood pressure, which had previously fluctuated dangerously, began to stabilize. The feeling of weakness and dizziness that was my constant companion was slowly being replaced by a new vitality. I began to feel an energy that I hadn't experienced in years. It was as if every cell in my body had been recharged, revitalized by the journey my consciousness had taken. The doctors were perplexed. Test after test showed a dramatic improvement in my condition, but none of them could explain why. From a conventional medicine perspective, my recovery was a complete mystery. For me, however, the connection was clear. The experience I had had was not just a spiritual journey, it was profound healing on every level of my being. The encounter with the golden light, the understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, the vision of the wheel of time. All of this had realigned not only my mind and spirit, but also my physical body. But healing wasn't just limited to the physical. I felt a profound change in my psyche. The fear and anxiety that had been my constant companions were replaced with a sense of peace and acceptance. The depression that often accompanied my physical condition lifted, giving way to a new appreciation for life and all its experiences. My perspective on life and death had fundamentally changed. Death, which once terrified me, now seemed like just a transition, a change of state. Life, on the other hand, gained a new meaning and purpose. Every moment, every interaction, every experience felt precious and meaningful in ways I had never realized before. As my physical health improved, I felt a calling to share my experience, to help others understand the vastness and beauty of the existence I had glimpsed. I knew that many would consider my story unbelievable, that I would be labeled crazy or delusional by some. But I also knew there were others who would find comfort and hope in my words. As I prepared to leave the monastery and return to the world, I knew I was embarking on a new journey. A journey not just of physical healing, but of spiritual transformation and sharing the knowledge I had acquired. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in many years, I faced it with hope, courage, and a deep sense of purpose. Leaving the monastery was like emerging from a cocoon. The outside world, with its noises, colors, and constant movement, seemed surreal after the days of stillness and introspection. Every sensation was amplified: the scent of flowers, the warmth of the sun on the skin, the buzz of human voices. Everything felt new and intensely alive. Returning to my previous life was more of a challenge than I had anticipated. How could I explain to my friends and family the profound transformation I had experienced? How could I continue with daily routines when my perception of reality had been so fundamentally altered? In the early days, I felt like a foreigner in my own life. The worries and anxieties that once dominated my thoughts now seemed trivial. Conversations about politics, celebrities, or the latest fashion trends sounded empty and meaningless. I longed for deeper discussions, for more meaningful connections. At the same time, I discovered a new appreciation for aspects of life that previously went unnoticed. A smile from a stranger on the street, a child's laughter, the kindness of a gesture. Each small act of kindness and beauty resonated deeply with me, reminding me of the interconnectedness of all the things I had experienced. My relationship with nature has changed drastically. I began to see each tree, each animal, each landscape as part of the same web of life of which I was a part. Long walks in nature became almost a daily necessity, a way to reconnect with the vast consciousness I had experienced. However, living with this knowledge was not always easy. There were moments of profound loneliness, when I felt like no one could truly understand what I had experienced. The vastness of the universe I had glimpsed sometimes made me feel insignificant and lost. But then I would remember the golden light, the unconditional love I had experienced, and I would find comfort. I began to see my role not as insignificant, but as an essential part of a greater whole. Every action, every choice, every interaction took on new meaning in light of this understanding. My relationship with time has also changed drastically. After having seen the wheel of time, the cyclical and simultaneous nature of all events, I could no longer see time as a simple, linear progression. Every moment seemed to contain within it the entire past and the entire future. This sometimes made it difficult to plan or worry about the future in the way people normally do. However, this new perspective also brought profound peace. Understanding that everything is interconnected, that each moment is perfect in its own existence, has allowed me to live more fully in the present. Anxieties about the future and regrets about the past have lost much of their power over me. My search for knowledge intensified. I started studying philosophy, quantum physics, spirituality, anything that could help me better understand and integrate my experience. I have found surprising resonances between my experience and the teachings of ancient spiritual traditions, as well as with some of the most advanced theories in modern science. Little by little, I started sharing my story. At first, just with close friends and family. Their reactions ranged from incredulity to fascination. But what surprised me most was how many found comfort and hope in my account. People who were struggling with illness, grief, or existential crises seemed to find a new perspective through my experience. This led me to share my story more widely. I started giving talks, writing about my experience. Not everyone believed, of course, and I faced my share of skepticism and even ridicule. But for every person who dismissed my story, there were others who were deeply moved by it. I discovered that my experience had given me a gift. The ability to offer comfort and hope to people who were facing death or dealing with the loss of loved ones. My own loss of the fear of death became a source of strength for others. As the years passed, I realized that living with this knowledge was an ongoing journey. There were days when I felt perfectly aligned with the cosmic vision I had experienced, and others when the worries and frustrations of everyday life seemed to drag me back to the old way of being. But even in difficult moments, the memory of that experience remained like an anchor, reminding me of the greater truth I had glimpsed. I learned to balance the expanded consciousness I had gained with the practical demands of life in the physical world. My near-death experience was not the end of one journey, but the beginning of a new one. A journey of integration, of sharing, of living fully in the light of the knowledge I had acquired. And while the path wasn't always easy, it was a path I walked with gratitude, purpose, and a deep sense of connection to all that is. As I reflect on my near-death experience and the years that followed, I realize that the journey of integration and understanding continues to this day. Each day brings new perspectives, new challenges, and new opportunities to apply what I learned from that transformative experience. One of the most profound lessons I have drawn from this journey is the understanding of the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. I see now that we are not isolated beings, wandering in an indifferent universe. We are an integral part of a cosmic web of consciousness, each of us playing a unique and essential role in the great drama of existence. This understanding radically changed the way I relate to others and the world around me. Every interaction, no matter how trivial it may seem, carries within it the potential for transformation and growth. An act of kindness, a moment of empathy, a word of encouragement. All of these small actions create ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. Viewing the earth as a living being continues to profoundly influence my daily choices and actions. I now see that our responsibility goes beyond simply taking care of the environment. We are an integral part of this planetary organism, and our actions directly affect its health and well-being. This led me to make significant changes to my lifestyle, seeking to live in a more sustainable and conscious way. The encounter with the golden light left an indelible impression on me. Experiencing that unconditional love and total acceptance fundamentally changed my understanding of the divine. I no longer see God as an external entity, a stern judge sitting on a heavenly throne. Instead, I perceive the divine as an immanent presence, a force of love and consciousness that permeates all existence, including each of us. The view of the wheel of time continues to challenge my perception of reality. I now live with an acute awareness of the illusory nature of linear time. This sometimes makes it difficult to navigate the normal world where everything is measured in terms of past, present, and future. However, it also gives me a unique perspective, allowing me to see the larger patterns and cycles at play in our lives and in history. One of the most profound changes I experienced was in relation to death. What was once a source of fear and anxiety has become something I view with acceptance and even curiosity. Not that I seek death, I love life and live it fully. But the knowledge that death is just a transition, a change of state, removed the terror I once associated with it. This shift in perspective on death has had a profound impact on how I live my life. I realize now that every moment is precious, a unique opportunity to grow, learn, and contribute. I no longer live in fear of the future or with regrets about the past. Instead, I try to be fully present in each moment, embracing both the joys and challenges that life presents. My experience also gave me a new appreciation for the importance of balance. While the expansion of consciousness I experienced was profoundly transformative, I learned that it is equally important to be rooted in the physical world. Finding ways to integrate the spiritual truths I have discovered with the practical realities of everyday life has been an ongoing challenge, but also a source of growth and discovery. Sharing my story has been an important part of my journey. At first, I was hesitant to talk about my experience, fearing skepticism and ridicule. But over time, I realized that my story could offer hope and comfort to many. I do not seek to convince anyone or impose my beliefs. Instead, I simply offer my experience as an alternative perspective, a window into a broader reality that lies beyond our everyday perception. One of the most important lessons I learned is the importance of humility. Despite the depth of my experience, I know that what I have seen and experienced is only an infinitesimal fraction of the vastness of the cosmos. There are many more mysteries to be explored, much more to be learned. I remain open to new ideas, new discoveries, always ready to expand and refine my understanding. As I look back on the young skeptic I was before this experience, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the challenges that led me to this point, and for the transformation I experienced. I don't want everyone to go through a near-death experience to gain these insights. Instead, I hope that by sharing my story, I can inspire others to look beyond appearances, question their assumptions, and explore the depths of their own consciousness. As I continue my journey through life, I carry with me the memory of that extraordinary experience. She stands like a beacon, guiding me through the ups and downs of human existence. I know I still have a lot to learn, a lot to experience, but now I face each day with a sense of wonder, gratitude, and purpose. My near-death experience was not the end of one journey, but the beginning of a new one. A journey of ongoing discovery, of expanding consciousness, and of service to others. It's a journey that I continue to embrace with my entire being, grateful for every moment, every challenge, and every opportunity for growth that life offers. In concluding this account, my hope is that it may serve not only as a testimony to my own experience, but as an invitation for others to explore the depths of their own consciousness, question their assumptions about reality, and consider the possibility that there is much more into existence than our physical senses can perceive. May we all live with open eyes and hearts, ready to embrace the mysteries and wonders that surround us, and to recognize the divine light that shines within each of us and throughout creation. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.